With the birth of television came a revolutionary shift in American culture. Although there are many ways in which the television impacted society, such as advertisements, educational programs, and celebrity culture, sitcoms were a unique way of appealing to mass audiences. Sitcoms are situational comedies, meaning they focus on one group of characters, whether they be family, friends, or co-workers, for the duration of the series. More often than not, sitcoms are performed in front of a live studio audience and will portray the middle to upper class experience. For 20 to 30 minutes, sitcoms offer a distraction from reality by portraying these comedic and usually idealistic lives. However, over time, sitcoms became less afraid to address serious societal and cultural issues in America. One of the most prominent sitcoms of the 1950s was I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy followed housewife Lucy and her husband Ricky Ricardo in their New York City apartment in the 1950s. This show appealed to white suburban middle-class audiences and included many conservative ideals which were popular at the time. In the episode Lucy Wants a Career, Lucy leaves her role as housewife to try and pursue a career in show business.
What's the matter, honey? What's the matter?
I don't like having a job. I'm lonesome for you and little Ricky. I want to be a housewife again.
Even though it was a progressive idea to portray a woman unsatisfied with being a housewife, the show ultimately shows that even if a woman tries to find a career, their natural inclination to take care of their family will be stronger, keeping them from being independent. This reflects the time period, as being a housewife was the expected role for many middle-class women in the 1950s. The men were expected to make money and provide for the family, while the women were expected to take care for the family at home. By portraying these stereotypes through sitcoms, it showed its audience that this was the accurate standard of a household at the time. Other examples of sitcoms in the 1950s were Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver. In both of these shows, the families are white and upper middle class, and depict an idealistic portrayal of family life.
You, 1, 2, 3.
Jim, you tricked poor Bud into dancing. 1, 2.
Ollie, I heard you mention going out after the show. Does that mean you're going to be out late?
Boy, I hope not. I'm not staying there any longer than I have to.
Staying where, Wally?
The ice cream parlor.
In both of these shows, the problem that arises is always resolved, and the families end laughing. The image of the perfect family was used to try and put an emphasis on the 1950s being a time of happiness and good days. The 1950s was not an era of social and political change. Thus, the sitcoms of the 50s mirrored the ideal white suburban middle-class family and societal roles.
Significant social change of the 1960s and 70s in terms of feminism, civil rights, and anti-war protests was mirrored in sitcoms. Starting in 1964, thousands of young college-age students participated in sometimes peaceful, but often violent protests over Vietnam drafts, violence abroad, and overall behavior of the U.S. government and military. CBS Network seized this opportunity to capitalize on the American public's outrage over the Vietnam War and attract this young demographic with MASH, a sitcom surrounding an Army surgical hospital during the Korean War. Not only did MASH push the boundaries of the traditional family sitcom, making these nurses and doctors each other's family, but it was also able to showcase the horrors of war without even directly discussing Vietnam like the evening news would.
There's always a war going on. War is the world's favorite spectator sport. Who's more skin suitors?
Well, everybody knows war is hell. Remember, you heard it here last.
War isn't hell. War is war and hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse.
Other shows of this time period, MASH pushed the boundaries with its language and behavior of its characters. Partying, drinking, pursuing romantic interests, and breaking military protocol were all common themes. Another significant television program of the time period happened to be the first truly female-dominated sitcom, The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Although still conservative in many aspects, the show was considered very radical by most in depicting an independent, unmarried working woman. Producers of the show were able to somewhat normalize Mary's lifestyle by putting her side by side with much more cynical, hardened friends and co-workers, making her appear wholesome in contrast. Additionally, the show was able to push boundaries for example in discussing the birth control pill and Mary's sexual encounters, by only implying Mary to be living in sin.
Are you going to a formal breakfast party? No. Just got home. Must have had some great time. Look, Rhoda, whatever I did, it's my own business, okay?
Don't forget to take your pill. I won't.
Mary Tyler Moore Show was also able to greatly further the women's movement by showing a successful working woman outside of the domestic sphere willing to stand up for herself on issues like equal pay.
Well, I figured it was just one of those woman things.
No, Mr. Grant, it's not one of those woman things. I would like to know why the last associate producer before me made $50 a week more than I do.
Oh, because he was a man.
Through Mary's friends, the show is also able to be one of the first to have a main character be Jewish or divorced, paving the way for sitcoms to continue showing the perspectives of more minority groups. Another example of a sitcom not being afraid to challenge societal boundaries was within The Jeffersons. The Jeffersons, although clearly following the lives of these family members, like MASH, it shifted and expanded the meaning of the family sitcom by showing a black family. The show depicts the life of George and Louise Jefferson and their journey moving from Queens to Manhattan after George's success opening up dry cleaning stores. The show refused to hold back in capturing the obstacles the Jeffersons had to overcome as a result of their race in order to reach this level of success and the discrimination they faced even after living comfortably on the Upper East Side.
Jefferson's had a couple.
A couple of what?
A maid and a butler, you two.
Butler, what?
Yeah, they must be real rich.
Hold it, Diane. We are the Jeffersons.
The Jeffersons was also the first sitcom to show an interracial marriage, normalizing this practice for many skeptical conservative Americans of the time. And being the first sitcom to show a prosperous black family and their struggles, The Jeffersons undoubtedly inspired and educated many, as well as paved the way for future sitcoms like The Cosby Show or Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
In the 1980s, sitcoms created an environment of comfort and intimacy, while also continuing to press American social and political issues. After the tensions of the 70s dealing with the economy, Vietnam War, and politics, many people were looking for an escape from reality. In the 80s, the economy had rebounded and the war was over. Sitcoms such as Full House and Cheers really emphasized the feeling of togetherness in the 80s.
You got Michelle? Then you have your Uncle Jesse and Joey? DJ, we're still a family. And now is when we really need to stick together.
We have everything that matters. We're together. Our loved ones are safe and happy.
This episode of Full House highlighted the importance of sticking together as a family, and the episode of Cheers offered the warm feeling of friendship. The 1980s sitcoms used this aspect to attract viewers that were unsatisfied with the hostility of the 70s. However, similarly to the 70s, sitcoms still utilized their platform to spread messages about issues of race and gender. One of the shows that continued to push for racial equality was The Cosby Show. The Cosby Show was the most popular sitcom of the 80s and featured an all-black cast and an upper-middle-class lifestyle. The show often portrayed black people living in a positive light, rather than the usual negative stereotypes that were shown.
I just want you to do the best you can. That's all.
I'll try, Dad.
Yeah.
I really will.
All right. I love you.
Yeah, Dad.
Huh?
I know.
Yeah.
In this clip, the father is shown to care about his son's future and tells him to try his hardest to succeed. A common stereotype at the time for black people was that they are incapable of success, resulting in urban ghettos. The Cosby Show denounces this negative stereotype, leaving an impact on the millions of people who watch the show weekly. Another issue that 80s sitcoms addressed was women in the workplace. In Who's the Boss, stereotypical gender roles are switched as the woman is the executive and the male is the housekeeper.
It sounds like you got Mars on line one.
Good morning, Wallace and McQuaid.
Listen to the way she does that, Sam. That's why they made her the president.
Instead of portraying the usual gender roles, Who's the Boss takes the stance that women could be equally successful. In the 1980s, the second wave of feminism was taking place, which expanded on first wave feminism by focusing on issues of sex, the workplace, and equality. With all of the social progression in the 80s came backlash, which sitcoms of this era have also managed to mirror. Family Ties follows a family of liberal parents raising 2 kids, one of which happens to be a conservative Alex P. Keaton.
What's taxes?
A tax is a terrible, hairy, liberal monster with big teeth. And the only thing that can stop the terrible tax monster is a Republican.
With the rise of conservative in the 1980s, Alex expresses many views that conservatives at the time felt as well. From 1981 to 1989, conservative President Ronald Reagan lowered taxes as a part of his political campaign against Democrats. Family Ties mirrors this aspect of American culture at the time with a more conservative character who follows Reagan's policies.
By the 90s, although sitcoms were turning more and more into simply a means of distraction, many were still being used as a method of furthering social change. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, for example, continued the journey started by The Jeffersons and The Cosby Show to represent the viewpoint of the black community. This sitcom took a slightly different approach, emphasizing the importance of minorities to remember their heritage and where they come from, as well as continuing to fight for social causes even after they may no longer directly affect them once wealthy, such as Will's aunt and uncle.
Looks like you forgot that.
You talk as if I wasn't there with you in Birmingham, facing dogs and fire hoses. This is me, Olafame. The same Olafame that was with you the night Harlem went up in flames. But now I have a family, and I choose not to fight in the streets. I have an office to fight from. And I have fought and won cases for fair housing, affirmative action, health care. And I am not ashamed to write a big fat check for something I believe in. And that doesn't make me any less committed.
Representing a different minority group, for the first time, Will and Grace followed Will, an everyday lawyer who happened to be gay, his roommate Grace, and their flamboyant gay friend Jack. In this way, the show successfully normalized the LGBTQ community to the American public by both playing into and fighting against stereotypes. When asked about his opinion regarding gay marriage, Vice President Joe Biden cited the show as stirring up social change, stating, "I think Will and Grace did more to educate the American public than almost anything anybody has done so far. People fear that which is different, and now they're beginning to understand." Aside from these shows, the most popular sitcoms of the 90s, like Friends and Seinfeld, mainly seem to depart into a new subgenre known as hangout comedies, which, with no real one-star or major plotline and following the everyday lives of normal people, almost appeared to be about nothing. This new style of sitcom, once again, pushed the boundaries of the traditional family, and Friends came to represent family. Regardless of the departure from sitcoms of the past, these shows were still pushing societal boundaries, this time using their simplicity to address unfair stereotypes, mainly regarding sexuality.
You know, it's something funny about sneakers. I'll be right back. Oh, yeah, I gotta get one too. What are you guys doing? We're just hanging out by the spoons. And ladle?
Look, will you guys grow up? This is the most natural, beautiful thing in the world.
What's the matter? My mother caught me.
Caught you doing what?
You know. I was alone.
You mean?
She caught you?
You know, nothing makes God happier than when two people, any two people, come together in love. Friends, family, we're gathered here today to join Carol and Susan in holy matrimony.
It is difficult to truly analyze the impact of sitcoms that are still running today. The trend of progressivism seems to continue into the 2000s. Shows like Blackish continue to fight to bring awareness to issues of racial inequality, while dysfunctional shows like Modern Family clearly represent the continual straying from the picture-perfect family sitcom of the 50s, addressing realistic racial and sexual topics instead. Regardless, time and time again, through every decade of television in American history, sitcoms have and will always prove themselves to be incredibly influential by subtly breaking apart societal molds and spreading awareness using humor and lovable characters.